Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Our current session focuses on the elements of ESP materials. I hope and expect by the end of session you would be able to understand the nature of the elements that are used in the ESP materials. Well, my dear students, 7 key elements of ESP materials are identified, which include number 1, the element of authenticity, number 2, topics and themes, number 3, texts and contexts, number 4, knowledge and language, number 5, tasks or activities, number 6, representations of participants and social practices, which means the nature of participants and their social background in which various social practices are carried out, and finally number 7, the pedagogical prompts that are used. These elements emphasize the totality of what constitutes ESP materials. Well, coming to these one by one, I would say authenticity has long been hotly debated in English language context and in English language instruction, and it has emerged since the birth of CLT, Communicative Language Teaching, in 1970s. CLT has advocated genuine communicative purposes. Mishan further argues that authentic resources in turn tend to stimulate the independent discovery and the process of learning. Well, today learner autonomy means taking advantage of the technological resources that are now widely available in the context of IT and that extend the notion of communicativeness to encompass computer-mediated communication. Authenticity is also defined as the actual use of texts, and texts mean, for example, text of hotel room reservation, etc., and tasks, that is the proper, task of doing or the act of doing online hotel room booking in vocational areas. Now, for low proficiency ESP students, authentic materials can be simplified based on the language and the content they wish to learn, and the students can work on shorter texts with relatively easy vocabulary and with simple clauses that they can understand. They also carry tasks with more capable peer or teacher support or tasks that are not cognitively demanding, for example, assisted role playing. In the ESP context, authentic language text and materials should be relevant to the specialized needs, the disciplinary knowledge, the social practices, and the contextualized discourses that the learners encounter. As far as the second element, that is the topic or the themes, are concerned, identifying themes is one of the important criteria for the selection of materials because a content topic is always the starting point for the learning processes. In deciding the themes in ESP materials, ESP teachers need to know the core competencies of their learners or the students' vocational areas amongst various topics of their interest or the topics that relate to their vocational contexts. These core competencies narrow down to the scope of materials ESP teachers are designing and in turn frame the foci of the materials. Now, what happens in every vocational area or field, there are subfields or sub-vocational areas, and when various kind of materials are designed keeping in mind those subfields, actually they provide the focused materials that can be used for those specialized vocational areas. For instance, students who are specializing in accounting should be provided with the tasks and the kind of tasks which fall within the remit of such core vocational themes such as financial statements, the recording process, making ledgers, etc. The third important element is of texts and contexts. As far as the creation of texts is concerned, it is always attached to the social environments or to the socio-cultural context in which they are historically constructed. Understanding text requires an interpretation not only of the text itself, but of the social setting, the sociocultural context, and the systematic relationship between the context and the text. Halliday 1999 argues the environment of language as text is the context of situation, and the environment for language as system is the context of culture. So these two aspects, as context of situation and as context of culture, are important according to Halliday. This suggests that texts are flexibly interpreted in relation to the context. This context involves users' texts and their communicative purposes, various genres within which they are used. To design ESP materials, that is for example, English for culinary tourism or for accounting English, etc., teachers should include texts which are relevant to these particular areas, and it should be taken care of that students will become familiar with how to understand and produce these particular contexts within the domains of those particular vocations. Now, the selection of vocational texts should be based on the authenticity of the text, which is an important parameter in this regard. Authenticity then means that the text is taken from real life context. The fourth important parameter or element is of knowledge and language. Well, knowledge is seen as systems for interpretation of the world, how to interpret the world. The systems that are transformed even as they are being used for understanding the world, this is what makes the basis of the knowledge for the learner. Knowledge development then cannot be divorced from, or it cannot be separated from, language development. In other words, in ESP materials, what is need to be taken care of, that knowledge development and language development. Knowledge, that of the particular field or vocation, plus the development of language, they should go hand in hand. From a functional perspective, language is a resource for meaning making, thereby providing a principled account of how knowledge as content and how language as a linguistic system or resource are intermingled, interlinked, and how they interact. Hence, linguistically, language is always integrated with knowledge as content because it presents and shapes the knowledge as content, and it organizes texts which actually comprise all the knowledge that is to be taught. The fifth element is of tasks and activities. For example, the task-oriented activities such as online hotel room reservations and completing a check-in in a hotel task to fill in the form for that check-in, or other language-oriented activities that are based on grammar analysis, etc. They are a crucial part of these materials. Task design determines how much students engage with the texts and other kind of activities according to Widodo 2015. The sixth element is of representation of participants and their social practices. Each individual and each group of individuals comes with a varied set of social practices and a varied social background, and all these need to be considered while designing materials in ESP. Representations of participant and social practices are shaped by the context of the situation, that is the language register that is used, and the context of the culture, that is the genre in which that language is used or from where it comes. The seventh element is of instructional prompts, that are instructive information that guides or enable the students to perform various learning tasks. These can be verbal or non-verbal scaffolds that help students manage or to self-regulate their learning. Now, the prompts can be questions or elicitations which aim to induce meaningful learning activities by eliciting various learning strategies, and thus the students are made capable of, to express themselves spontaneously. Prompts stimuli active processing for the learning of the materials, and they direct the attention of the central aspects as well.